being live streamed on the county's YouTube channel. So I think a message probably has popped up for most participants there on that. So the session tonight will run from 6:30 till 8 o'clock this evening. Before we get started, I'd like to formally recognize the traditional keepers of this land, in particular our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation, with a formal territorial land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that Northumberland County is located on the Mississauga Anishinaabeg territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabeg. Northumberland County respectfully acknowledges that the Mississauga Nation are the collective stewards, caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. As mentioned, tonight we're discussing the intersection of County Road 2 and County Road 10, County Road 74, Dale Road in the hamlet of Welcome, which is located in the municipality of Port Hope. The purpose of tonight's session is to provide all those that are with us with an overview of the public feedback and data that we've gathered to date that indicates how the unique configuration of this intersection could contribute to possible traffic incidents and driver confusion. We'll also share the options that are currently being considered to address those concerns, and then we'll be seeking your feedback. Just a quick note for everybody that's taken the time to already share with us via social media channels, email, and our Join in Northumberland page. We're very appreciative that you've taken the time to do so. We really appreciate all the input, and we will be parsing through all of that material along with the feedback we receive here tonight. So as you're all aware, tonight we're meeting via Zoom due to the pandemic restrictions and an effort to maintain our social distancing and other best practices. So you'll notice that you've joined muted and with your webcam turned off. This is just to help everybody on the call understand who's presenting and speaking, and keep things as streamlined as possible. When we move over to the question and answer session of this evening around 7 o'clock, to ask a question, you can access and unmute your camera buttons by clicking on the bottom portion of the Zoom window where the toolbar is located, or clicking into the participants list where you'll see your name and you can unmute yourself or raise your hand. We'd encourage you to raise your hand during the Q&A session to help us have a useful discussion and make sure we can keep track of who has questions and input, and we'll try to get to as many people as possible, hopefully everybody that has input this evening. So with that, we'll jump into the first portion of this evening, which is a presentation. So as I mentioned, the session's planned for 6:30 till 8 o'clock tonight. We've talked a little bit about the Zoom meeting protocols already and some housekeeping. I'll quickly roll into some introductions, then we'll move through background and past studies, discussion of the conceptual options, and then wrap up with some discussion of next steps and an opportunity for feedback. So the presentation probably will take about a half hour to 40 minutes. We thank you for your time and patience, and hopefully there's some useful information along the way for everybody to help inform our conversation afterwards. So quickly, by way of introduction, on the call this evening, there's myself, Dan Campbell. We have Denise Marshall, the Director of Public Works. I believe Brunilda Tenna, our project engineer who's working on this project, is also with us, along with some of our communications and corporate services team that are helping everything run smoothly. And we also have Ron Albright from SEMA. And Ron is a project director with SEMA and has been the project manager for the work that SEMA has done for the county on this project to help us develop and understand the various options. So jumping right in, the project rationale, what's led us here. So the intersection, I think as many people probably know, was originally part of MPO's road network, and it's evolved over the years, started as a two-way stop, became a three-way stop because of some of the sightline constraints to the east of the intersection along what used to be the old connecting link Highway 106, Dale Road now. So that's what's led to that traffic control arrangement. There's also some other challenges, including the grade coming up to the intersection from the west traveling eastbound, as well as the offset and skew between the south leg of County Road 2 and County Road 10. And a variety of other issues. The size of the intersection is somewhat unique in that there are multiple lanes controlled by a stop sign, which is not typical, but not entirely uncommon. So those are some of the unique elements that have led to a lot of the public feedback that have been received by the county over the years. And through that feedback and other studies that have been done, including the county's transportation master plan, the intersection has been identified as a location to monitor and consider for potential operational and safety improvements. All that being said, there are some definite challenges that make simple solutions at the intersection very difficult. So the sight lines and the grades and the slopes do make it complicated to just jump straight to a four-way stop or plunk in other physical improvements with it without having impact. So we're going to talk a lot about that this evening, share what we know and ask for your feedback around those items. So that's really what the current feasibility study is all about, is helping us to quantify the impacts of implementing some of these potential solutions so that we know just how invasive they might be, how expensive they might be, and we can make an informed choice about the path forward. So a bit of a recap of things we've probably already touched on a bit, but the purpose of tonight's meeting is to share project background, present several possible options, outline what initially has been identified as the possible impacts and benefits of those options, and then receive feedback from those that have joined us tonight. So the project process and timeline, just for the feasibility study that we're in now. So we've completed a background review and analysis, including listening to the comments and input that we've received to date. We've developed some possible options, and we're here tonight as part of our public consultation process. After we wrap this up, we'll incorporate the public feedback that we received tonight and following up tonight, as well as in the lead up to tonight. And we'll use that to tweak and refine the options and how we understand the impacts of those options. And then we'll move forward in the summer to finalizing our feasibility study report. From there, we would look, pending budget approval and direction from council, to moving towards a detailed design for a preferred alternative, whatever that might be, and then construction in 2024 or beyond. And again, that all being contingent on council approving the budget to move ahead with those activities. So moving into a little bit more specific background, just want to touch a little bit on some of the previous public input that the county has received over time, and that's really come in three forms. So first, we do receive calls and concerns about specific near misses or collision incidents that do occur at the intersection. People concerned about why that might be happening and levels of confusion. So those complaints have come in. There's certainly also just been general questions about the configuration, mainly related to the three-way stop, and suggestions of considering alternative traffic control, including can it be converted to a four-way stop, and can a functional roundabout be built at this location. Somewhat counterbalancing that, we've also received lots of input from intersection users and the public over the years about the concerns related to the slopes on the eastbound approach. So coming to the intersection eastbound, and particularly how that operates in bad weather when there's snow and ice and other slippery conditions on the road, how that can be a challenge for vehicles that need to stop and then restart on that eastbound approach, and kind of taking that to the next level, how that works when the 401 is on an emergency detour and using County Road 2 and Dale Road or the rest of County Road 2 with traffic traveling eastbound along that stretch. So we've heard all of those concerns. It has led us to ask, what could we feasibly do to possibly improve this, and that's why we're here tonight. So going back a little bit in time, in 2015, the county did a speed review in Welcome. And that review looked at collision history in Welcome and sort of pulling some of that information. Between 2001 and 2014, there were 21 motor vehicle collisions of various nature within the Welcome area. So that's on all of the roads leading into and through the hamlet. 3 of those collisions in that time period occurred at the intersection. Or sorry, 3 of those collisions were between 2010 and 2014, and 1 of them was at the intersection. And all of those collisions were property damage only, fortunately. So touching just a little bit on speed from that study, The average operating speed was in the range of 70 to 77 kilometers an hour with the 85th percentile speed. So 85% of the traffic is doing at least 80 to 88 kilometers an hour, depending on where that was measured in the hamlet. So the study determined that the 60 kilometer an hour posted speed limit is appropriate, but driver compliance was found to be an issue. There were recommendations for transition improvements to be implemented at the hamlet entry points to encourage compliance. That's been done and monitored, and the effectiveness of that is limited, and something that the county continues to monitor and work on solutions as we implement our speed management programs at various locations across the county. So this study briefly touched on the intersection. It wasn't a study of the intersection itself, but it did touch on the fact that the intersection is complex, and potentially simplifying it in some ways could be beneficial and potentially worthy of further exploration. So since 2015, the county, working with MTO and OPP to receive collision records, has continued to monitor collisions at and around the intersection. So there have been 8 recorded collisions since 2015 up to 2020. 5 of those were within the intersection or on the stop controlled approaches to the intersection. The 3 that are shown with the yellow dots were related to intersection operations and a failure of one vehicle to yield the right of way to another where required. So a function of how the traffic control is being obeyed or not obeyed. And 2 of those, the green dots, were rear end incidents at the intersection where one vehicle stopped and another vehicle either failed to stop in time or just did not stop and ran into the rear end of the stopped vehicle. And then 3 that are around the intersection, but were not related to the operation of the intersection itself. They're either single motor vehicle collisions or collisions involving an entrance to a driveway or commercial site. Coming forward in time a little bit, 2019, the county did an intersection conflict analysis. So 1 week of video data was captured for the intersection, and the video was used to evaluate potential conflicts between traffic. So the conflict analysis identifies situations where 2 vehicles come very close to occupying the same physical space at the exact same time. So in other words, basically a near miss. A collision didn't happen, but 2 vehicles came very close to colliding at the same point in time. So the diagram here illustrates the various movements at the intersection. A couple are removed for simplicity, but then the 7 different dots show individual conflict points between the various movements that were evaluated. So getting a little bit more technical on that, that analysis uses an approach called post-encroachment time, which really looks at when one vehicle encroaches into the area that another vehicle has just left shortly before. So the video data can be used to automatically identify vehicles and how far in space and time they were separated, and then allow that data to be digested and reviewed. So that 1 week of video data identified that there were no very high conflict PET values with less than 2 seconds observed. There were lots of moderate values of 3 to 5 seconds observed, and some high conflict values of 2 to 3 seconds. So when analyzing those values and combining them with a severity of a collision related to the potential conflict, the numerical data there suggests that conflicts between the eastbound left turn crossing the westbound through movement and the eastbound through movement crossing the westbound left turn movement are potential risks, which I think probably comes as limited surprise to anybody. That's the through movements with the left turn movements, and one of those movements being the uncontrolled leg where traffic is not required to stop. The southbound right crossing the westbound through also cropped up because there's lots of vehicles that tend to accelerate quickly together through that section and be close together, although the severity of those potential collisions is lower than the others for sure. So we're going to jump into conceptual options now. I'm just going to introduce some options, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ron to walk us through those options. So we have 3 options we'd like to talk about tonight. The first option is converting the intersection to a 4-way stop with full reconstruction of the intersection to create a flatter road profile to allow eastbound traffic to stop and restart. So we're going to talk about what that means and why it's necessary. The second option is converting the intersection to a roundabout with related changes to road alignments and profiles. And we'll show a concept of how that could work, what the footprint of that is like in the community, and what some of the potential benefits and impacts of that are. And then finally, we'd like to also talk about an option where the three-way stop is maintained, the existing road profile of the slopes are maintained, and the intersection is reconstructed in its layout only, and just the lane configuration is changed. And to kind of use a bit of a industry term, we put it on a road diet and squish the road in and sort of reduce the vehicular space, increase space for other users, and try to simplify the intersection and bring everything closer together. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ron, and you can take it away.
Thank you, Dan. As part of our review, many design elements were considered when assessing the alternatives. First and foremost, safety for all users of the intersection, visibility for stop vehicles, and being able to see left, right, and forward, making sure obstructions are not in these lines of sight. The other sight line that is important to assess is being able to see oncoming vehicles when looking past a crest of a hill or looking through a vertical curve. Potential property impacts as a result of design alternatives, optional impacts, or how users, operational impacts, or how users negotiate through the intersection, or such as the time people are waiting to go through the intersection, the number of lanes required to provide an acceptable level of service for the intersection, and the steepness of the approaches. How changes will impact property owners accessing their property, impacts to such things as hydro lines, buried communications, gas lines, water mains, storm sewers. And finally, consideration beyond the vehicle and looking at impacts to other uses such as cyclists and pedestrians. Next slide, Dan. In order to assist the selection of options, SEMA Plus reviewed the traffic data at the intersection to see how the intersection would operate under the changed conditions, namely reducing the intersection to have just a single lane approach in all directions, removing the left and right turn lanes. This would allow for a tighter intersection and flexibility in looking at design options. The result showed that the intersection would still operate at an acceptable level of service for the concepts considered and with all traffic control considerations. Next slide, Dan. So the first option with being able to implement an all-way stop requires some significant changes to the current configuration of the intersection. This option depicts the tightening of the intersection, showing the reduction in lanes, but the larger impact in order to provide a suitable platform for vehicles to stop, namely in the eastbound direction or on the west leg of the intersection, requires a significant flattening of the intersection, requiring some cut on the east part and fill on the west portion of the intersection. As I noted, lanes were eliminated. There's no dedicated left turn lanes, channelized right turn lanes, or dedicated right turn lanes. And this intersection design is a little bit unique. It does accommodate large tractor trailers, but in the normal, under normal conditions with normal size vehicles, it provides a tighter feel with their truck aprons on all quadrants to allow for the larger trucks, but the curb, there are basically two curbs involved to keep the intersection tight for the more usual users of the intersection. And the other portion that we did consider for this, with consideration of cyclists, was allowing for a 1.5 meter wide paved shoulder or cycling that could be used as a cycling lane within the limits of reconstruction for all quadrants. The alignment is shifted slightly, or is shifted mainly on the north leg, shifting region road or County Road 10 to the east to better align with the south portion, and to again, this goes to simplifying the intersection and having better visibility. And as a result of the reconstruction and some of the modifications, both east and west of the intersection would result in steeper entrances, again, east and west of the intersection. Next slide, Dan. So in this slide, we're depicting the changes that are required. So the green line in the middle represents what the new profile would look like. The pink area to the left is the fill, which amounts to 1.2 meters in some locations, or 4 feet. And to the east, just under 2 feet, or 0.5 meter cut is required in order to achieve that 5% platform, stretching for 30 meters on the west of the eastbound stop bar at the southwest quadrant of the intersection. Other things to note is that the intersection is aligned, so there, it's not jogged any longer for the north-south movements. And again, just the tightening of the intersection, so there's single lanes in all approaches. Next slide, please. So the benefits and impacts of the full reconstruction and all-way stop accommodation, or four-way stop accommodation. Again, 30-meter platform to allow for vehicles to stop on a flattened platform, which is roughly 5%. If you look at a normal road, when you're looking at the crossfall on a road, which is from the center out to the edges, that's usually 2%. So this is roughly 2.5 times that. The existing slope that is on the west leg of the intersection is roughly 7.3%. So considerably more than the 5, but the 5 is kind of the design standard for a stop condition. The reconstruction would also provide for better vertical sight lines through the intersection, so you can see oncoming traffic much better coming from the east or west. The reduced intersection size brings the stop vehicles much closer together and makes for better decision making at the intersection, improving sight lines, pulling the vehicles closer to the center of each of the crossroads. So some of the obstructions that are currently in the sight lines on private property or in the right of way are no longer are limited. There are still some, but they are greatly reduced. And then the other benefit with this option is the opportunity to accommodate cyclists through the intersection. Impacts, significant costs to reconstruct due to the significant grade change. Essentially, bringing the road down means you have to basically create it from the bottom up, reconstructing the entire road base. Improved significant grading impacts even within the right of way as well as to private property, creating steep side slopes, driveway entrances, and regrading of driveways extend well back into private property. And the four-way stop configuration may compound issues during Highway 401 eastbound EDR operations. Next slide, please. Option 2, so a roundabout. This option was not originally on the table, but after further review and some discussion with our roundabout experts, we're able to physically fit it in, but there are significant impacts to it. So the traffic control at a roundabout is yield, with the right-of-way being given to the vehicles within the roundabout, and approaching vehicles must yield to those vehicles. For this option as well, similar to option 1, significant regrading or reconstruction of the intersection would be required. The other large impact is a property requirement. With the other options considered, it can be fit within the current right-of-way. This option would require the purchase of property to build a roundabout. Lanes, again, all lanes are, with the exception of the southeast quadrant, are single lane approaches. There is the need for we'll call it a channelized right as part of this roundabout configuration, just due to the skew of the intersection and being able to get vehicles around that corner. So it is a little bit modified from a traditional roundabout, but due to the geometry, the additional right turn lane is required, or channelization. Again, County Road 10 needs to be shifted and to be able to make the transition through the roundabout. And with the reconstruction and flattening of slopes to accommodate the roundabout, there will be impacts, namely steeper driveways associated with this option. Next slide, Dan. This is just a blow up, just to give you a closer look at the elements, and the red outline in the top corner of the roundabout is the property that would be required to accommodate the roundabout. There are, again, you can see sidewalk connections, and the approaches are controlled with splitter island, so it naturally reduces the speed on the approaches, which I will get into on the next slide. Thanks, Dan. Speed reduction at the intersection approaches. As I said, there's a natural, or the design includes an offset approach to introduces basically a double curve that naturally causes you to slow down and negotiate through the roundabout. If there are accidents within a roundabout, the severity of them is greatly reduced and typically is just property damage. The roundabout provides an opportunity for a gateway feature, which for either the county and or municipality of Port Hope, which if you've been in other areas, many municipalities take advantage of the center of the roundabout to do just that. And over the long term, and a greater clarity and understanding for the drivers, this would become familiar. They would become familiar with the roundabout and be able to negotiate it just like any other intersection. Impacts and disadvantages, as I noted earlier, there's significant property impacts, which would require the purchase of at least one full property and potentially some additional widenings in isolated locations. Significant grading impacts similar to option 1 that would impact driveway access steepness and front yard tie-ins. Significant cost to construct this option. Initially, there aren't a lot of roundabouts in this area. It would take some time for people to get familiar with operation of a roundabout, but ultimately that would change over time. Reduced width of on the intersection approaches for farm equipment. While this is Well, it will accommodate tractor trailers. It's designed to do that. That's the center apron is for. It, especially in the Highway 2 and Dale Road portion of it, it is narrow than what's there. But with the aprons that are provided, normal farm equipment can negotiate through these, but it would be reduced from what is there now. And again, similar to option 1, a roundabout may compound issues during a Highway 401 EDR situation. Option 3, which essentially would be a similar configuration to what is there now, with the implementation of removal of the approach or the added left turn and right turn lanes that are currently at the intersection. The profile would match what is there now. Curbs would be pulled in. They could be built on the within the existing asphalt, and fit in. Repaving would most likely happen within the limits of the curb placement, just to provide potential crossfall correction. Limited impacts to property. It fits within, most of the work can be fit within the existing asphalt footprint, and there'd be next to no changes to the existing access or driveways associated with this work. The alignment shift for County Road 10 would be required, and I've mentioned the entrances already, and the other benefit with this option, similar to option 1, is there would be an accommodation for cyclists through the intersection. Now, one other thing that we would suggest that could be done with this to help improve clarity of the intersection is providing some advanced notification as to how drivers are to negotiate through the intersection, or more importantly, how the other drivers at the intersection are going to operate through the intersection, and specifically highlighting that eastbound traffic does not stop. This is not a standard road sign, but it has been done in other locations. There's a similar location in Bowmanville where this type of sign has been implemented. And it could be provided as an advanced sign as you approach the intersection, and a similar tab could be provided on the actual stop sign as well to help provide some clarity and understanding of the intersection. Next slide, Dan. This is just a typical section of what the road might look like after reconstruction of option 3. Showing the accommodation of the cyclists. The thing to note here, you can see on the slide, there's the existing edge of pavement, which is noted by XEP, is well outside the limits of where the road will end up. There's room for cycling lanes on the road, and a paved shoulder, which could be used by, a paved boulevard behind the curb, which could be used by pedestrian as well. Next slide. Similar to the previous one, in this instance, it is a little bit wider than the existing EP. This is further to the west, but so there would be a slight widening, but does not impact properties well within the right of way. But again, accommodation of cyclists and additional paved boulevard to accommodate pedestrians, and again, single lanes in each direction. Benefits: reduced intersection size brings stop conditions closer to that together for better decision making and sight lines and eye contact with the other drivers. Accommodation of cyclists through the intersection, and minor to no grading impacts on private property. Impacts or disadvantages for this option: it does not address or improve the road slopes to allow for acute vehicles to stop on the on the west approach or eastbound approach. Does not improve vertical profile of County Road 2, County Road 7, and the sight lines to the east will remain substandard. And the three-way stop would remain as a platform suitable for an all-way stop isn't provided. So again, it would be similar to the current configuration, but much tighter and allowing drivers much more awareness of the other drivers at the intersection. And I did mention that that confusion of the intersection could be improved with some advance and signage at the intersection itself. And I think I hand this back to you, Dan.
Sure. Thanks for walking us through those options, Ron. So we're going to wrap up, talk about some next steps, and then we'll move into questions and answers. So thanks everyone for your patience and attention. So next steps, where do we go from here? So we'll assess all the input received from stakeholders and our various consultation processes. Then move along to finalize the feasibility study and post that study up to the project page on Join in Northumberland. And then consider next steps for design and construction of the project by moving it through our 10-year capital plan process, which is part of the 2023 budget deliberations that council will go through, where they'll approve which projects will move on to detailed design and ultimately construction in the future. So getting to the end of things here, public input. So Northumberland County and the SEMA project team thank everyone for their continued feedback and interest in this project, and thanks for joining us tonight. So how to provide feedback and stay engaged. So right here, right now, you can raise your hand in Zoom by finding the toolbar and clicking the raise hand button. We'll then move to people that have raised their hand in order as close as we can, and allow people to be unmuted and ask questions to the project team or just provide us with feedback. We just ask everybody remain polite and respectful of everybody else on the call and everybody's time, and try to make sure that we have an opportunity for everybody to speak. After the presentation is over, you can visit the Join in Northumberland page to access some of the presentation material from tonight. And if you have comments you would like to submit through the Join in Northumberland page, either on the page or just as an email to the team, you can do that. And we'd ask that you do that before May 6th. You can follow that page to reach out to us if there's a particular item you'd like to follow up on, and just generally stay informed about the project. So with that, I'll open it up to anybody that has questions and feedback, and we'll go from there. So please feel free to raise your hand. Okay, I see we have Bob and Deb have raised their hands, so I'll ask them to unmute and go ahead. Sorry, I may have just muted you again.
Yeah, try this.
I think we're good.
Good. Yeah, Dan, thank you for that. We have a group of people here, so we have Bob and Deb, and I'm actually Dennis. The one question that came up around our table was, will there be further feedback when you come to your next set, or is this the last chance and then you're going to go ahead and do something?
I think we'll certainly be posting the finalized feasibility study up to the Join in page, and we would ask folks to review that and give us some feedback. We haven't yet established whether we'll do another public information center, but as a bare minimum, that study will be posted up to the page. If you're following that page, I think you can get notified about new materials that show up there and provide feedback that way. And
the feedback page is great, but there's between the town and the county, there's an awful lot of stuff to keep in touch with. So
sure.
I know some people have put their hands up there for clicking on please keep me informed, and we're surprised I haven't had any email feedback at this point from the project. I have a bunch of other things, but if anyone else has their hand up, I can take my turn.
Okay, yeah, I do see a couple of other hands, but we'd be more than happy to come back to you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Thanks. So Daniel W., I see you have your hand up, so I'll just ask you to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, go ahead.
Perfect. I just had some concerns. The option one you presented with regrading the road, if it's a four-way stop, I think everyone would be in agreement that you would have to regrade the road. But is that feasible? You mentioned around slide 10 or 12 somewhere there that you looked at it, and narrowing the road lanes would be permissible. It would allow the right amount of traffic to pass through there, in essence. But you also said that it would be a 30-meter section of not flat but flattened off surface. A flattened off at 30 meters. That's one transport truck and maybe a car squeezed really close behind it. So clearly you've looked at this, but I wonder, when you did your study, what time of year was it done? Because this is a very seasonal intersection. Was it during the fall when grain trucks and transports are traveling through there every few minutes, or during a 401 closure, or the snow? That's the biggest concern with, stated another way, the best option that I saw of the three, not that you really care about individual opinions, was option one. But you narrow up that road, you're going to have more traffic queued there. 30 meters, one transport, that's not enough. And if you read the comment, I think I have the last comment on your join in page there, where I talk about, for those of us that pass through this intersection every day, in winter or inclement weather, or seasons where there's all kinds of traffic there, it's a completely different ball game. If you tried to have transport stop, you'd have 5 stops in a row, and they would not be able to start again after that 30 meters. Even the 30 meters at 2.5%, or sorry, you said it was 5%. That's still not great. I don't think that's enough. And I'm just quickly trying to look at a topographic map here. And if you went back any kind of reasonable amount there, you'd be into a huge, huge project. So those are my concerns. Whether or not you are taking concerns or just want comments right now, I'm not sure.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. I think those are all great points, and they get at what we've been working on in detail. So, in terms of is it feasible, it's certainly less feasible, and it's a major undertaking in comparison to, say, option 3. 30 meters, I'll agree with you. It's basically the bare minimum of what we would be comfortable providing there, in any way, shape, or form. So, and we have looked at numerous options. Ron and his team have been through a variety of options to look at how could we make that 30 meters longer. And I'll, I guess, characterize it this way: anything longer than 30 meters, the amount of fill and the impacts to entrances is basically a non-starter without essentially reshaping the entire community along that western leg or the eastbound approach. So the 30 meters is basically as close as we can get to a minimally acceptable condition, if I could characterize it that way. And,
that's what I suspected. And although I'm no expert, it's been years since my course on traffic analysis. I think you'll find 30 meters wouldn't be enough, especially with narrowed lanes. If you had the multi-lanes now to spread out traffic a little bit, it might be okay. If you narrow that up, I think you'll find you'll have backlogs all the way to Newtonville.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We'll certainly duly noted, and we appreciate that thoughtful feedback. I'm not seeing anybody else's hand up now. I know that Dennis has indicated he may have some more comments. So I see BV 9800 Pro has their hand up. So I'll ask you to unmute and you can share with us. Thank you. Go ahead.
When's the just trying to find out when construction of the intersection would be implemented? Would that coincide with the 401 being major reconstruction on the 401 as well? Would that be an issue?
We'd certainly look at, as we do with all of our projects, the timing and how it fits in with what other jurisdictions of government are doing, whether that's our municipal partners at Port Hope, say, or the MTO. Right now, there's no definitive time schedule for construction. We would most likely be in design in 2023 is a possibility. And then construction beyond that, it would be all those subject to how council approves the 10-year capital plan moving forward and what option we choose to proceed with here. So when we get to that time of construction of it, we would definitely be looking at how it would dovetail with other projects in the area, though.
Great, thanks.
Bob and Deb, Dennis, you're should be unmuted or able to unmute there.
Hey, we're unmuted again. Just a very quick comment here, and I was going to say that I wasn't around in the last century, but then I realized I have to say I wasn't around in the century before that. One of the original names proposed for Welcome Corner there was Guide Board. Because the road was so complicated, they had a fancy guide board up there saying where everything went. Seems to me that nothing much has changed in 150 years. But my view is that better signage and better driver education and speed control seems to be what's at the root of every solution that you need to get here. So the question I had was, what other intersections are you monitoring and studying in the county? Are there other roundabouts to refer to? And I seem to recall in the news a few years ago, a proposal for a roundabout on County Road 2. I may be mistaken on that, but there was a proposal and there's a lot of feedback that said it wouldn't work there on a dead flat along the lakeshore. So I'm wondering if that's the case, and if I'm not mistaken, why would one work here?
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'll try to sort of break that down into pieces and give some feedback on that. On the roundabout front, I may ask some of my other colleagues to jump in here. I've been with the county a relatively short time, although I've lived here my whole life and done lots of projects for the county and other area municipalities. But I know that the County Road 2 municipal class environmental assessment that was completed 4 or 5 years ago, I think, does include the implementation of a roundabout at Telephone Road and County Road 2 as part of the preferred solution. So that's an option that has been reviewed more in the past.
Sure, I can just add to that, Dan. So yeah, that was the County Road 2 environmental assessment that was done on between Cobourg and Port Hope. So there is a roundabout at Theatre Road and County Road 2. And so it is part of a long-term implementation. So when it's a fairly long stretch of road. It goes right from within the urban area of Cobourg all the way to Port Hope. So part of the approved alternative was that roundabout, but it is a phased implementation. So we've already implemented some of the improvements through Cobourg, and we're slowly working our way through the 5 phases of that implementation. So a roundabout is one that we're still looking at, but we're not at that design stage yet or construction stage. So again, it is something that we are looking and have plans for in the future, but just haven't got to that point yet. So we don't have an active roundabout to actually monitor within the county, but we do know a lot of the municipalities around us. Within Cobourg itself has a couple of roundabouts that are available for monitoring, and a number of the municipalities, as I said, surrounding the county have roundabouts that we're able to sort of draw upon and monitor and understand their experiences.
Thanks, Denise. And I guess in terms of just other intersections in general, we do have a number on our radar where, coming from our transportation master plans and other data that we work through, that we are monitoring. The county has recently, over the last couple of years, completed some safety improvements to a number of intersections along County Road 30, which formerly was MTO Highway 30. So at Old Wooler Road, I believe we've undertaken some intersection improvements there. At County Road 29, coming across from Warkworth, there have been some improvements completed there. And on the docket for this year's capital plan are improvements at Telephone Road and Danforth Road along County Road 18 north of Cobourg, and we do have a list of others that we'll be working through. That this is definitely one of that we have on our radar, being the one in Welcome.
So just to follow up on that, then, how do those compare in terms of perceived safety problems to Welcome?
everything is obviously unique based on the road configuration and the topography. And I'll say that that Welcome is probably more unique than most. It's got a lot of characteristics that kind of combine together. The solutions in other areas are definitely more straightforward. The obvious solution, I'll say, is more straightforward at other locations that we've tackled. We certainly do in our project on County Road 18 that we're planning for this year have some significant grade changes to make there to the crest of a hill at Telephone Road to open up and improve sightlines. But yeah, I would put Welcome ahead of some of those other ones that have been tackled in recent years for sure in terms of its level of complexity.
So I guess just to sort of wind up this stream of my thinking, I have to think that what you've presented to us is that of the accidents, very few of them were in the intersection. Most of them were related to speed outside the intersection and driver confusion. So it would seem that the solution has to be something to do with driver education, better signage, and speed controls. I mean, if you put speed bumps on number 10 and number 74 leading up to the intersection, would that not slow people down and wake them up? And if you talk about better signage, have you considered the possibility of overhead signage, as sort of an archway across, like you see on some of the major highways, that saying you've got this lane for here, this lane for here, this lane for there type of thing, giving better heads up visibility to people to see that there is actually something going on there. And it would be higher than their land profile, so they'd see it before they saw the intersection.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. To respond a little bit on the speed side, certainly this is not a new issue for anybody on the county team that deals with transportation. It's not a new issue for any municipality in Ontario and probably most of North America. We're all looking for ways to reduce speed while still maintaining kind of safe and efficiently designed roads. Speed bumps are definitely a challenge in our environment where we have winter maintenance to contend with and plowing operations. So we typically do look to other tools, one of those being to try to narrow in the roadway within safe limits, obviously, and create a more confined environment, which typically leads drivers to slow down when they don't feel that they have as much runway, so to speak, to work with and to have forgiveness for any mistakes that they might make. So that would certainly be a part of just about any option that we presented tonight, is that tucking in and narrowing the roadway and trying to create dedicated space for the other road users. And that's probably the best and most long-term effective way of reducing speed. Certainly, Welcome remains on our radar along with 20 some other hamlets and rural communities on the county road network where we're looking to continue to implement speed management measures and traffic calming measures, including our hamlet entry treatments, which we've had pilot programs going on. One of the first was in Welcome, and we've continued to do a lot of fine tuning of that up in Cold Springs on County Road 18, and started to work at rolling that out to other areas. So we recently did that northbound going into Baltimore on County Road 45. So I'm not sure if I captured everything there, Dennis. I guess you did have a comment also about overhead signage. That's certainly something a little bit that has crossed my mind as part of how we might fit signage in with these truck aprons. Would we use an overhead arm? More commonly, that's being seen associated with pedestrian crossovers or PXOs, where a certain type of level of that design includes an arm out over the roadway. So I think that's potentially an option to consider, is how we can use some of those more creative methods of getting our message out into line of sight, so to speak, as we start to look at implementing some of this stuff. So we appreciate that point. Daniel W., I see you have your hand raised again, so I'll unmute you, seeing nobody else.
Thank you very kindly. Just a couple of quick notes. I'm going to ask what I think Dennis might have been hinting at there is, and I know you don't want, I know I've run enough of these meetings to know that you don't want everyone's opinions about other potential solutions, but is keeping things as they are and just improving signage? Is that on the table at all?
Yep. Yeah, I'll say as we've been working through these options and recognizing the timeline to go through design and go through construction is not immediate. We have definitely talked about how we could improve signage similar to what's currently shown in option 3, and diving a little bit deeper into that to see what else we may creatively add to that is definitely an option that we would consider in the short term, knowing that we can't implement any of the 3 options tomorrow by any means. One other thing that we have considered is the so on the western approach, the eastbound approach, there's the pavement markings associated with the crosswalk that was there previously, and I believe had crossing guard supervision when the George Hamilton Public School was still open. So with that crosswalk no longer being, it's not on a stop controlled approach, it's no longer supervised by a crossing guard, we would consider removing those pavement markings in the short term to make it more transparent to the eastbound drivers that they're not stopping, and similarly more transparent to the drivers on the other legs that there's nothing resembling a stop bar or a crosswalk that typically is associated with a stop condition over on that leg. So those are some short-term things in the less than 1 year timeline, I'll say, that we've considered possibly doing. Previously, the county had implemented some pictorial 3-way stop signage at the stop signs, just to give drivers a graphical sense of what they could expect from the other approaches. Now, again, that's non-standard signage, so not everybody understands quickly and easily how to interpret that. That was one, I believe, that was adapted from something that had been implemented in a few locations in Saskatchewan. So it's not a common one here in Ontario. So we may look to try to implement some other alternatives similar to what we showed tonight to try to bolster that or take a different approach and use words rather than pictures, I guess.
You've taken the words right out of my mouth, and I thank you for that, because I remember one of my highway engineering professors in university who said a stop line is more important than a stop sign, because the stop line is viewed by the other 3 or however many directions. And that, I think, is one of the biggest problems, that thick, bold white line there. I think that should be number 1 on the list. It's unfortunate that George Hamilton is closed, but with its absence, I think that's good. And again, I know you don't want everyone's opinions, but in Quebec, they use signage, and I wish I took a picture of one, because I saw some a few times and they looked like the ideal thing for this intersection. It was a stop sign, and below that there was a small pictorial, well, not that small actually, a pictorial diagram of the 4-way stops and the little red light wherever there was a stopping entrance, and a yellow light blinking wherever there was a through entrance. And I always thought those were very well implemented, and they made it immediately clear to approaching drivers what was happening at every approach.
Okay, no, certainly that's not something I've seen in my travels, but we certainly appreciate that. And yeah, any and all opinions are welcome. That's why we're here tonight, and to benefit from everybody's input and thoughts. So we thank you very much for that. Okay, I'll move to BB Pro or BB 9800 Pro. I'll just ask you to unmute.
Yeah, just one quick question about the 3-way, if the potential for the 3-way stop, if you're narrowing lanes, traveling eastbound from 2 to Dale Road, to do with the sight lines of when that is narrowing of the roads. Right now, there's a merge lane that goes northbound to eastbound, and there's actually a lane for the people who are living in that area for potential turning into their driveways. With the reduced single lane, then they don't have that safety zone in order to pull into their driveways. That would be a big concern there with the speed of traffic and everything.
Okay, yes, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come back to, actually, I see Ben Corelli has his hand up for the first time, so I'll start there with you, Ben.
Thanks, Dan. Just wondering what consideration was given to stop lights on the north and southbound only, making it a two-way stop?
So to make it a two-way stop, we've certainly looked at this a number of times, and the real challenge for it to be a two-way stop is the sight line when you're traveling eastbound, what you can see to the east, so the westbound traffic coming towards you. So because you can't see as far as ideally you would be when you're coming up the hill eastbound, if you're looking to turn left, if there were westbound traffic approaching you that wasn't required to stop, you don't have enough time by design standards to safely decide to and then execute that left turn. So that's really the reason why a two-way stop north and south and through traffic with no control east-west can't work, is to accommodate that left turn movement. And it does predate my time. Possibly even my time behind the wheel, but I understand that is really how it became a three-way stop, is that in the past, Highway 106 was the same as Highway 2 coming across. There was no stop control there, and that it eventually morphed into a three-way stop to address that sightline issue. So without cutting that grade down to open that sightline up, a two-way stop doesn't work. We have looked at that. Ron, you can jump in here, but the cut to make that happen is fairly excessive, and similarly, when we drop the road down into that cut, it results in the driveways on the sides just sloping down into the road at really unacceptable slopes, or needing to grade them all the way back towards the houses to get them at acceptable slopes, which then leads us to the other alternative. If you can't lower the bridge, then raise the water, or lower the water, raise the bridge. I'm mixing my metaphors here, screwing them up, but that's what leads us to saying, well, okay, then we gotta raise up the other side of the intersection, which then introduces these other issues. So a two-way stop option is similarly complicated to probably the four-way stop option in a lot of ways, in terms of the physical landscape kind of impacts of the grading work that would need to happen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, back to Bob and Deb.
It's Deb this time.
What about, in the meantime, putting arrows going eastbound, just sort of a straight arrow and a curved arrow, just so that people are aware that they can go without stopping. That's a good idea. Painted on the roads, I'm meaning.
Yep. Yeah. I'm following you. So yeah, there are currently so the right and left turn lanes that are there are delineated with an arrow. The through lane, which is a dedicated through lane, doesn't have an arrow. We certainly could consider adding that as sort of a short part of our short-term strategy. We'd be able to look at that, and that's definitely something we would do, is look at pavement markings for all of the lanes and how we can layer those in with some signage. So yeah, we appreciate that suggestion, and we'll have a look at that and see how that could fit.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, not seeing any more raised hands there. If there is anybody that wants to jump in, by all means, please raise your hand. Come back to you, Daniel.
Sorry, I promise this will be the last time I interrupt. I was actually hoping to start a quick dialogue with Ben there, because if I read between the lines, I would say that your or Ron's preferred solution might have been option 3 there. It seemed to be the least invasive and the one that you for the most benefits with. My concern for that would be farm equipment. As I mentioned in my first comment there, it's a very seasonal road. At some times of the year, it's nonstop farm equipment. Now, I might have my own concerns if I were getting farm equipment through the intersection. If the lanes were narrower. I think the line that Ron used was normal farm equipment can negotiate a roundabout, and that's with the narrowed lanes. My concern is what's defined as normal farm equipment, and I ask Ben because I think he's probably doing more large equipment through that intersection than anyone, or any other farmers who might be on this call. How would you feel about that being 2 lanes instead of the wider lanes with the wider approaches, especially from the west there? I would have concerns myself, but I don't drive enough through there to really judge accordingly.
Thanks, Daniel. I'll just jump in just quickly there, and then if there is anybody that would like to chime in with some real world experience on that end, we'd be very happy to hear that. So in terms of the narrowed lanes, we're still typical traffic lanes 3.5 meters wide. So we'd still be having a 3.5 meter lane with a 1.5 meter paved shoulder adjacent to that. So that's very similar to what you would find on most of the rest of the county road network. Less, that said, there would be a curb there instead of more gravel shoulder off to the side. So you would still, a vehicle going through still has 5 meters of clear asphalt to work with, which is, I think, typically would accommodate most normal farm equipment. I'll put that in quotes because it is difficult to categorize what's normal as equipment changes in the market, and we all know, as everyone's looking for efficiencies, things tend to get bigger and grow over time. So that's a little bit of framework there anyway. And I think Ron was speaking specifically to how the roundabout inscribed circle itself would sort of work. Anybody that wanted to jump in on farm equipment? I see. Well, there's Ben. You should be able to go ahead, Ben. Let me try again.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, we're good now.
Farm equipment can reach quite a long way over the side of the roads as long as the curbs aren't too high, or someone well, just high curbs or guardrails are the problem. So I think we can usually negotiate that.
Okay, yeah. In this case, I think we would anticipate a typical 6-inch curb, what we call a barrier curb. So yeah, just 6 inches above the gutter elevation. And certainly, I think both Ron and myself and the rest of the public works team here, we're very cognizant of the guide rail issue as well. But fortunately, that's one challenge we don't have in Welcome is really steep side slopes, fortunately.
But if I may add a comment, you must address the crossing walks, make them well marked. It's scary seeing people try to get across there on any of the sides of the intersection.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, I don't see any more hands up. If there is anything, feel free, or if that's all the feedback folks have for tonight, we can wrap up there. We'll take this away and synthesize that into our next steps. Okay, hearing silence and seeing, oh, there's a hand from Rick Cole.
Yeah, good evening. I'm sorry, I actually ended up coming in a few minutes late, and I obviously missed the presentation. So at what was the most preferred option here to proceed with?
So we presented 3 options this evening.
Yeah, I've read them. Which one did you go for?
We haven't presented a preferred one. We won't do that until we wrap up our feasibility study and post that up based on the feedback that we are receiving here tonight and parts of our other process.
And so what was the feedback mostly in favor of, the roundabout approach or no?
It's a bit difficult at this stage to say what for sure the feedback is most in favor of. It's also not necessarily a numbers game that way. What we're really looking to do is gather some of the dialogue type feedback that we've had here, so we can tweak our assessment of those options and fit it in with the perspectives that we're getting from the community. So I'm not sure that directly answers your question, but that's
No, it's okay.
how we'll be moving forward, I guess. So short answer is we don't have a preferred option here tonight, although I will say I think we've tried to be fairly clear that options 1 and 2 have very significant challenges associated with them, and they're not as easy as they might seem on the surface.
I think that would be just a general comment from my perspective. I know, I mean, I was born in Denmark, and one of the things they use in Europe a lot in all, particularly the rural areas and where there's not, electricity available or whatever, you'd have to use solar, is they go with the roundabouts, and the roundabouts have proven to be a very safe approach. And as long as they're wide enough to handle the rural vehicles in those areas, then it's obviously may address some of the challenges, but I don't know if the roundabout poses a problem for pedestrians. That's another issue then.
Yeah, so just to, I guess, quickly recap some of what we had in the presentation around the roundabout is it's certainly it's viable. Anything's viable with a large enough investment, but it is very impactful. It does require will require the county to obtain property on the northeast corner of the intersection, so there would be a home there that is displaced by the footprint of the roundabout, and the grading east and west of the intersection to flatten out the road approaches to make it suitable for a roundabout then has significant knock-on or secondary effects on the slope of all the entrances going into the properties within the area immediately east and immediately west of the intersection.
All right, well, thank you very much for the information.
Thank you, appreciate your feedback. Miranda, I see you have your hand up, so I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi, Dan. This is Miranda's husband, Mike. I had a quick question with regards to the crosswalk signage that you said was going to be removed. With the reworking of the Welcome Park, we're likely going to see sort of an uptick in pedestrian movement in that area.
Okay.
Also, I mean, we walk a lot of kids through that intersection. So I guess just maybe be mindful that that park's slated for a redo, and there's going to be a lot more pedestrians coming through that area. So I don't know if removing the pedestrian crosswalks is a viable option.
Okay, thanks for that. We appreciate that. We'll certainly talk to our colleagues at Port Hope about the planned work for the park, make sure we fold that into our considerations and look at how those pedestrian movements fit with everything there, and recognizing it's a challenging spot for pedestrians for sure. Okay, we had a little flurry of hands there, which is great. Just maybe go one last call if there's anybody else that wants to chime in, and if not, we'll wrap up for the evening. Okay, so thanks to everybody that's come out tonight and listened in and taken the time to provide your feedback. And as we've mentioned, we'd love to have anything that you want to put in writing to us. For sure, jump over to the Join in Northumberland page and come back to us. That way would be great. So with that, wish everybody a good evening and a safe long weekend, and thank everybody who's helped out tonight with the presentation and responding to questions and getting us organized.